we are now going to be handing over to our first panel of the day, and I'm very excited to be welcoming a huge array of diverse voices, people who are really at the forefront of thinking about research and innovation and community involving practices. So please welcome to the stage our chair of this panel, Alison Park, Deputy Executive Chair of the Economic and Social Research Council, and our first panellists, Pandora Liu, Dr. Dipti Angra, Hannah Yu Pearson, and Dr. Ben Williams. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Helen. I'll let my fellow panel members sit down, and I'll maybe kick off by just speaking from here. I'm going to say a few words just about why we're here and what we want to get out of the panel. Then I'll introduce our panel members in turn, ask them a couple of questions, and we'll really get the opportunity to find out more about the fantastic work that we've been doing. So my name's Alison Park. I'm the Deputy Executive Chair for ESRC, so I'm a colleague of Stian's. And we're both here because ESRC both has a very strong interest in public engagement and because we host the public engagement team who work across the whole of UKRI. And I'm going to start by just giving a few sort of words of context to this session that sort of picks up on some of the really helpful points that both Stian and Helen have made already. So the main reason we're here for this session is really to celebrate the power of some of the fantastic community-driven research and innovation that UKRI has been supporting, and to hear more about what that actually looks like in practice. There's a huge array of work that we have been supporting in this area, and Stian's already given you a couple of good examples of that. But they range from funding researchers directly to work with the public to make the public a kind of active and equal partnership in that research project. And we'll hear a really good example of that in a moment. We've funded projects where we're actually funding communities directly and pairing them with researchers to sort of do the work of interest to them. And finally, examples where we're funding communities to work as communities without any expectation of direct involvement with professional researchers. And we've got a selection of projects today that I think bring each of those types of research really kind of accurately to life. All those projects are very different, but I think they all pick up on a number of really key principles. And actually that word cloud that we saw earlier was fantastically helpful in sort of narrowing down on two of them, which were about impact and about equity. So all of these projects really stem from a focus on urgent social problems and a commitment to trying to address those urgent social problems, to having impact through involving the people who are most affected by them. And then the other key strand to them is that desire to address imbalances in who can and cannot access research and innovation, and work towards more ethical and equal partnerships in working with those communities. So really trying to break down that barrier between them and us. And that was really brought out, I think, in many of the words that came up in that word cloud. And during this discussion, our intention is very much to explore examples of this kind of work, really think about the impact it's having, think about the appetite for it, and what kind of additional support might be helpful. So, on that note, I will introduce the four panel members we have here. I'm going to introduce them each in turn, and then I'll kick them off with a sort of introductory question. So firstly, we have Pandora Liu, who is a member of the Reading Hong Kongers Community Interest Company, and Dr. Dipti Angra from the University of Reading. And together they have been working with Reading Hong Kongers to investigate the impacts of community gardening on belonging, identity, cohesion, biodiversity, and mental well-being. And that's an example of a project where we've been pairing community groups with professional researchers, and it was funded through the community-led research pilot. We'll then hear from Hannah Yu Pearson from Centric Lab, who has been working on creating a toolkit for justice-led health impact assessments. And that was funded via the Community Knowledge Fund, where there is no expectation of communities working with professional researchers. And Hannah will be able to tell you more about her work in a moment. And then last but not least, we have Dr. Ben Williams from the University of the West of England, who's been working with citizen scientists to investigate the extent of the microplastic crisis. And that's funded through the Citizen Science Collaboration grants, where we're funding researchers directly to work with members of the public. So I'm going to kick this session off by asking each of our panelists to reflect on two questions and talk about their project in relation to those two questions for about up to 5 minutes each, if that's okay. So the first question is thinking about how communities drove the approach that you took to research and innovation in your project and trying to bring to life your project for the audience. And then the second is to reflect on what was really valuable about this community-driven approach to research and innovation. So really thinking about what impact the project had, what contribution to knowledge it's making, and the sort of factors that you feel contributed to this. So I will start off by passing first to Pandora. So Pandora, do you want to kick us off? And then I know you wanted to pass over to Deepti.
Okay, thank you so much, Alison. Hi, everybody. Yeah, thank you so much for today. It's a very special moment for myself because I arrived, I migrated to the UK 4 years ago, and I carry my identity as a Hong Konger migrate to here. Sorry, I giving myself a warm up. Okay, let's talk about the questions. Sorry, I just need a warm up. Sorry, and it's about how to drive the research and innovations in our community net research. Yeah, it's a very fantastic process. Our project is about at the beginning, because I migrate here, I register as a volunteer in a community garden, and I've really experienced how gardening support myself to build a new identity, and resolve my mental well-being. So I want my life experience to pass to our community. Every Hong Kongers in the UK can have the same experience. Therefore, I'm very lucky to meet very nice people to support me to apply the BSA funding to do community-led research. For me, research is a very I like to say it's a very far away from me, and it's about the researcher, and in academically very specific, very professional. But in Hong Kong, I have some experience to collaborate with university researcher, but it's very different from here, from this project. DP and some others really nice, really fantastic researcher, people from the University of Reading. They support me, support our community to go through the process. Yeah. And we co-design the research questions because my lived experience is not easy to formulate as a research question. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, because it's including the methodology, how to design. We have no idea about that, especially on the agricultural planting. I study social science. I was social worker in Hong Kong. So I have no idea about the science part. But when we co-develop the research questions, and throughout the process, we work together to make our thoughts, our idea to the reality. Yeah. So this is a very empowering process to me, to my members in the community. Joining the project, we could 15 ambassador, all are volunteer. They are Hong Konger. They newly migrate to here. They love gardening, but they have no ideas what resources in the UK, in the local community. This project helped us to group together. We build a connection, the community bond, not within among ourselves, and with the some of local charity and local community gardens. There are many local gardeners. We work together and we share about how to grow the oriental crops in the UK, and DP may later share about the result. And everybody join in the project. We not only grow the crops, we experience how to grow the oriental crops in the UK field, and how to measure the temperature, the humidity, monitor the germinations process. All this data will put back to the Dr. DP and help us to make do the experiment in the lab. Finally, it was very fantastic and out of our expectation. Is the oriental crops grow in the UK field, the sugar content and the flavor compound are higher than the lab, those grow in the lab. Okay, those crops grow in the lab is grown under the assimilations of Hong Kong weather. This is give us many hope, because we don't think the British weather is unpredictable. For us, it's very I don't know how to describe it. And I always said that, okay, I know why the British people want to talk about weather. I always talk to my Hong Kong friend. I want to talk to weather, many times, many changing. Yeah. And but for us, it's a hope. It's an aspiration for us to we can get touch with, growing the oriental crops is a kind of identity of as a Hong Konger. Many members share that when we can eat the oriental crops, bok choy, choy sum, it's like we go back to our homeland. Some of us cannot go back homeland anymore. Yeah. And this is a very, emotional process. And this is building our identity. Yeah, so sorry, out of focus. And yeah, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. No. I think it's time's up. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much, Pandora. You've already explained the context of how we started doing this project. So, as you said earlier on, and as I was also said in the introductory bit, that this project was actually was already kind of being built on by interaction with the Pandora and her group. And so they had some things on mind, some objectives they were looking at. It was a rough sketch of what they wanted to do. So when I stepped into this project formally, it was kind of on my shoulders now to how to give it a shape. So we made the community and the Hong Kongers at the center of this project, and started refining the ideas. And that happened by regular meetings and workshops, and explaining everything as to what really entails to growing an oriental crop, be it UK weather condition, or be it let's say in Reading, in university grounds, or in artificial conditions like growth chambers, etc. So we said that we are going to sit down and develop the project together, and we are going to do the experiment parallelly. So I did some bits over at University of Reading site, and they did exactly the same bits on their side in the community gardens. And we shared the results with each other. We went to each other's sites to have a look at how the crops are growing. I think I remember the first experience which I had when Pandora and her group visited Reading was when they saw my plants. They were, the expression was, "Wow, can they really grow like this?" I can never forget that expression. And I really felt very honored and very proud at that moment that can I give somebody such a good memory, such a good experience that they were just jaw dropping as to how it was happening. So that was a bare bit of growing the crops. So the second part was that they wanted to know whether the taste and the flavor of these plants which were growing in these conditions were exactly or similar to what grows in the Hong Kong mimic conditions. So that's where involved a little bit of a lab work, which I did with my group over there. But we had a very engaging experience because we brought Pandora and her group over to Reading, and they really could hold the little equipments and instruments, and they could really feel the science behind it. Yes, and also not just this. So this kind of put joined all the dots that we provided them some evidence to show how science works. So for them, science was just not limited to the labs or limited to the universities. It was kind of something they could do in their own kitchen gardens and something which already we are providing support with. So my role basically was to provide them the resources and the infrastructure to support what they wanted to do. And I think I was successful. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, both of you. So I'll pass now to Hannah, who's going to tell us about her work on justice-led health impact assessments.
Thank you. So I work with Centric Lab, and Centric Lab builds infrastructure for health justice and communal healing. And this piece of work that we did around community-led health impact assessments was co-developed with a community group, grassroots advocacy group called Clean Air for Southall and Hayes. And they were advocating for clean air around the development of a gasworks site in Southall. And we co-developed across a 4-year relationship a community health impact assessment. So health impact assessments are a policy tool. They're a requirement within planning applications. So when a developer wants to submit a planning application for a new development, they'll need to do a health impact assessment. And often these environment impact assessment, health impact assessment, integrated impact assessment, they're like a lot of jargon, and they're like very technical pieces of policy that are submitted along with hundreds of other documents in a planning application. And these health impact assessments rarely take into account the lived experience and the data and information that communities are living in this given area. So we, across this 4 years, developed a community-led health impact assessment where the community determined their own data points, they did their own data gathering, and it was all around reframing lived experience as data, storytelling as data, sharing different things that mattered to them as being impactful for their health. And then from this program, no, from this health impact assessment, we co-developed with Clean Air for Southall and Hayes a year-long program with 12 other groups to go on this. And we created this toolkit summarizing our learnings. And across this program, we had people based in Stoke-on-Trent called Portland In Project. We worked with Grenfell Tower Trust, Downham's Community Land Trust. So lots of community groups across the UK that were facing health injustices and supporting them like design their own community-led health impact assessments. And the reason why this is important is because the World Health Organization guidance on how to do a health impact assessment is that they're democratic, they're equitable, there's an ethical use of data, and they take into account sustainable development. And why is this important? Is because current health impact assessment methodology fails to recognize the susceptibility of communities who have experienced chronic and disproportionate exposure to harm to environmental harm and the high risk to stress-related health problems that they may be experiencing. So a lot of these communities have engaged with consultation processes, community engagement processes through local government or the developer, and these have often resulted in harm. They're sites of violence, sites of gaslighting, when communities have gone to their doctors and said, my child is experiencing nosebleeds, experiencing headaches, have lost the sense of smell, asthma, lung problems, all of these that are indicating air pollution. But a doctor may turn around and say to them, like, oh, because you're from this demographic, you're predisposed to having these health conditions. So it's like, it's kind of on you rather than it's the environment. So instead of prescribing, say, a home with good ventilation, which a doctor is not really able to do in the UK, it's instead prescribing like inhalers and stuff, which aren't really addressing the wider problem. And when health impact assessments are done by developers that don't have relationships with community, they would say use absenteeism data from schools, which would be like, oh, we can tell that children are unwell because the children are not going to school. But this is not helpful in an area where people are on 0-hour contracts, on shift work, are often not able to take their children out of school if they're ill. So that data is just not accurate of the lived experience of people in the community. Or it would be like the existing health impact assessment was of using like a broad area of health data instead of using the street that was next to the brownfield site, which means that you can average out the health injustices of that one street by using data of experiences that are further away. So the existing HIA was full of this kind of unethical use of data. And the one that we did was to just start with conversations like, what makes you feel well? What are you concerned by? Like, not really talking about health. We'd say, what keeps you up at night? So through these conversations, we would get to know what was important to communities. And then from there, start to build up like the data for it. So we went on this journey with these 12 other groups last year, and now we're redesigning the infrastructure again to support more groups this year. And there's a lot more to say about it, but I'll let you go on.
Fantastic. And we will have an opportunity to sort of probe into some of those areas. But finally, we'll hear from Ben about the work that he's doing on measuring plastic pollution. So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So just to contextualize this, can I ask you to just do a very quick activity? Imagine you're sitting down but pretending to walk. So you're stamping your feet and you're shuffling your arms. Could you just all do that very quickly? This looks great. There's no reason. I just like the. So it's really hard sometimes to visualize and experience pollution. What we were really interested in was airborne microplastics. So think about your activity now. Think about what you're wearing. Think about what you're sitting on. Think about what the carpets are made from. That type of landscape exists in all of our houses to varying degrees. If people have hard floors, that'll be different to people who have carpets, etc. But that experience there of generating microplastics, microfibers, is something that we experience day in, day out in our homes. When we designed this project, we were right in the middle of the pandemic. We were under various degrees of lockdown, so we generally had no idea when we were going to emerge from this. We could still be in lockdowns now as far as we were aware. But what we wanted to do was to explore the presence of plastics and fibers in the air in homes, because there's very little research out there at all on airborne microplastics, for example, at the time. And where we expose to most of these is going to be in our homes. So how do we design a project to be able to engage with people, to generate new knowledge on a really novel subject that adds value to that research landscape, to the general knowledge landscape that we all exist in as well. So that's how it came about. Other examples here of embedding within the communities, I'm really envious of, because it sounds fantastic. And we were at an arm's length, again, partly by design, because of the pandemic, etc. Yeah, but these examples are phenomenal. So what we did then was to think about some of the experiences we've had in participatory research over the last 10 years on people's barriers to accessing and engaging. And a lot of that is technological. So some examples in the past, we've given people Raspberry Pis to build to measure traffic. That is technologically really awkward. I am terrible at building Raspberry Pis. Um, and as part of the people who are designing the project, it's not a very good accessible project. So what we try to do is to think about how do we get people to participate? How do people engage better? So we had 2 stages in this project. One was a pilot where we wanted to work with those that are often highly engaged and quite technologically savvy. And for those people to help co-create the method that enables more people to participate, to try and lower those barriers, increase access. Um, in doing that, we tested 4 different, maybe 5 different clip-on microscopes attached to phones. Feedback on people's uses, how people use it, how people feel about it, how people test our machine vision tool. So basically a tool that allows us to upload a picture and it'll outline the fibers, for example, and give us some counts. And some of our questionnaires as well. Are they accessible? Are they understandable, etc. To enable, again, that reduction in the barriers for people to engage with. From that, we had over 100 people participate in the generation of data, as well as those who have co-created the method with us. It's generated new knowledge on the presence of fibers in people's homes. So, for example, bedrooms have the most fibers on average, followed by bathrooms, really interesting. But as an example, that is not going to be the same in other countries. So in the UK, for some reason, and I thought it was normal, but clearly not, is we have our washing machines and dryers in some houses in our kitchens. Now, other parts of the world have them in bathrooms. So again, the design of homes, how we live, will have a really big role to play in this as well. But that new knowledge generation has then opened doors for some work that we're then trying to do with schools on a similar topic. We've taken the same method to schools, have them critique that approach, and for them to say it doesn't work for us, we need to tweak it again, because every group that we engage with are going to be different environments, different experiences, and different needs. Yeah, it's been fantastic, and I'll forever be grateful for this opportunity. It's brilliant.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ben. So I'm going to follow up now with just some questions to sort of stimulate a discussion with members of the panel, really building on some of the points that you've already made. And the first one I wanted to ask was just, all of you in different ways have talked about some of the difficulties of identifying participants for your work. And I wonder if you could just say a little bit about how was that a big challenge, trying to move beyond the usual people who might get engaged in the kind of work you're doing? I mean, I'll start with Hannah, and I appreciate you're slightly removed from this, but if you could maybe say a bit about how the community groups you worked with, how did they try and get beyond, make sure that they were engaging with as wide a range of that community and not just talking to the most engaged with sort of research and science?
So a lot of the groups that we work with are those that are already like deep in a battle, often like advocates, like campaigners that are like really like spending a lot of their energy like fighting something, tend to be really burnt out and things like that. So a lot of the ways that we use this funding, for example, was to remunerate them for taking part in the program and then having them have access to funds that were then redistributed so that they would be able to cover the costs of like a village hall, provide like a free hot meal, provide childcare. For those taking part, and then have that space as like a nourishing, resourcing space for the community. And then from that base of like gathering the community to be able to casually have conversations around what was meaningful to them and to just start at that place. So we were trying our best. It's kind of like the Black Panther philosophy, like each one teach one, that if we could invest in these groups, then they could then in turn invest in the communities that they were in, and try to access and have conversations with like the rich data or the storytelling that people were holding and the expertise that they had, and often a lot of the solutions that they had when they were framed outside of the language that we were using. So a lot of it, I think, is a resourcing and a time and a trust issue. But I think not framing it as like we're going to have a conversation about health impact assessments. No one's really interested
Yeah.
in like coming to that conversation. Whereas like if you want to come and have a community meal
Mm.
and connect, and it's all provided for, then that uptake is greater.
Great, thank you very much. And if I could pass on next to Pandora and Deepta.
Okay. Yeah. I think we have the advantage is I am the community member. It's very easy. Yeah, because I have my lived experience and I share my experience to other Hong Kongers. And we both have curiosity and yearn for the integration, the social integration. We have the same needs. There's personal needs is equal to community needs. So based on the needs, we gather the Hong Kongers who are quite interested in gardening, and because at the beginning they don't know what is the identity building or how is the well-being or support the well-being, they have no ideas about that. Yeah, but they love gardening. Yeah, and we at the beginning we have focus group sections, and we I share my experience. Everybody share their migration, the experience during the migrations. There are many loss, grief, frustrations, tears. I think at that moment we connect and build up the bond and really understand what is the project is about and what is the goal we go for. Therefore, fortunately, they are quite committed, and now we um, step forward to build a community food growing team. Hopefully, we can grow more oriental crops to support, to contribute to the local community. Yeah, I think so.
Great, thank you. Anything to add, Deepti?
So I think Pandora has mentioned pretty much everything. Another way where we interacted with other members beyond Pandora and a small group of people was through the workshops and through the meetings. So we would organize the meetings and workshops very often. I think it was like once in every 2 to 3 months. So we would sit back and discuss as to, in-person meeting as to what has happened and what needs to happen in the future. And is everybody really happy with what's happening, or if people have some different ideas, they can bounce back and say, well, you need to stop and start thinking about something different. So we kept a lot of transparency through these meetings. And another good thing also was that we did not restrict ourselves to just Hong Kongers. We opened this kind of a meeting to other community members as well. So even if they want to participate in it, they want to engage and provide some inputs, we were very happy to take that. And that was kind of very, very well received. That's how I made many of the connections who are sitting here, far and beyond the Hong Kongers project. So that was a plus point. The way it was designed, the frequent meetings which we had really helped us engage with the wider community.
Thank you. So, I mean, what I take from all three of those responses is there's something there about starting broad and not going in with this very, very kind of narrow question. And then there's something about the structures and the sort of format you use to try and engage with people. Ben, any reflections on that from the perspective of your work?
Yeah, again, being in the pandemic, it was quite difficult to plan how we would engage with people in general within this. And one of the targets of the specific call was to engage with underrepresented communities as well. So what we tried to do was to work with community organizations who are embedded within underrepresented communities. So for example, as they were then was the Bristol Green Capital Partnership, now Bristol Nature and Climate Partnership. We tried to engage through their networks in the first instance. And then the broader advertisement more generally for people to participate. Despite that, we're quite open with it. Our, in terms of demographic of participants, were not what we wanted in terms of targeting the requirements of the call. But what we then tried to do was to go, well, how do we improve this? And this is where a lot of the work from the schools came from. because schools within communities who are not well represented in science often don't have the opportunity to participate in this work. So we wanted to engage with them to then see if we can develop the method and for them to be able to inform get new knowledge in that space as well. So there's a lot of learning for us from that perspective, really significant amount of learning. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. My next question is just digging a bit deeper into the impact that you feel has come out of the work that you've been talking about. And I appreciate in some cases, it might be very early days in terms of that work, but could you just for each project reflect on what you see the kind of key impacts as being, whether that's on a particular community or whether there's kind of broader impacts for society as a whole? And perhaps I could go back to you, Ben, just to kick us off on that one.
Yeah, I guess there's several layers to it. Firstly, there's those who participated and their knowledge development, and through conversation with those who participated, many have spoken with their families and friends about the subject. So there's kind of a snowballing of messages within those communities in particular. From a research perspective, that's been really valuable in that we've got some publications out on the presence of fibres in people's homes. We've got papers out on the evaluation of the project specifically, which enables us to kind of critique publicly what we've done. And then there's the opportunity then to push it in different directions and into different audience. So I mentioned the schools work again. To me, that's really important. Children are often really good advocates. So if you can teach children about a subject, they'll often take it home and have those conversations with their parents, etc. And for example, don't go looking for it because it makes me cringe to the depths of my bones. It was an opportunity to do a Welsh language reality TV program on microplastics. Again, don't go looking for it. I have to hold someone's wee up in a test tube. Why couldn't they use apple juice? I don't know. But as a different audience, again, that we're able to communicate with. So it's the 18 to 30-year-olds who might not necessarily have wanted to participate in a citizen science project or a participatory research project. So again, the opportunity to have those. And then from a policy perspective, this project and some of the descriptions of it have ended up in an air quality expert group report that is part of DEFRA's publishing outputs as well. So there's lots of different layers to things that have come out of it, and it's been really exciting. Apart from that reality TV program.
Fantastic, thank you. I don't expect anyone else to be able to match the reality TV, but so you're talking about the sort of impact on the people who participated, the fact that you've produced new research out of it, that you've seen policy impact. And you've managed to reach new audiences. Hannah, do you want to reflect on your own project in that context?
Yeah, so if we see it from the perspective of the group Clean Air for Southall and Hayes, which was a community group, the outcome of their health impact assessment was they wanted to build an infrastructure of solidarity to turn their health impact assessment into a toolkit so that other groups across the country could learn from this. So this is what we used the funding to do. And they ran the program with us, which was to go through the process of doing a health impact assessment with 12 other groups across the country. And this in itself is that was the motivation, as in this is not just about one outcome, it's about building an infrastructure that's of solidarity between advocacy groups, which was really important in and of itself, especially when so many of the health injustices that people face have also experienced a lot of gaslighting when facing institutions and when trying to advocate for change. So this was in its own way a tool against gaslighting and to affirm the experiences that people had, which was very powerful in and of itself. Separately, Clean Air for Southall and Hayes managed to present this health impact assessment to the head of the council. And the head of the council himself reflected that the council didn't have the tools or the skills to be able to produce this form of knowledge, and that actually their own processes were flawed. So sometimes it's to just expose the capacity, you could say, or the incompetence of a lot of these data and research processes that are within institutions, because the community can show really what data is. And it's hard as well. It's not just I think sometimes people see community engagement work as like really to the side, but I'm sure all of us disagree with that. And then the final point is to say that whilst not everyone through the program produced a health impact assessment at the end, they produced things like community health charters. And one group, Portland In Project, by doing this community health charter, had evidenced and baselined the community's needs around health. And then an opportunity recently arose around empty homes and derelict homes in the council, and they were able to redistribute these homes to Portland In Project. And this is because Portland In Project had identified that a lot of the health concerns in their community were around inadequate housing, around like mold, dampness, ventilation. So because they'd already had this baseline of knowledge, it meant that they were more able to respond. And this is also what we really think about when doing community-led research, is to have like baselines ready. So communities are ready and agile in the face of change to be like, this is our evidence base and this is what we need, rather than in each crisis, like scrambling to understand what's happening.
Brilliant. Thank you. So some really good examples there, both of kind of policy impact at a local level and practice impact as well. And then finally, Deepti and Hannah, any reflections from you?
For the community, yeah, it's a kind of empowerment, yeah. Really, because during the project, there are many technical issues. For example, set up install the weather stations, and and some of our members, they have the knowledge about gardening, about horticulture, but they input much their knowledge and skill throughout the process. During the process, I can observe our members become more confident to reach out to the local community. As new immigrants, it's a kind of a barrier to reach out to the local community and connect with the local people. And we really start this integration process. Yeah, for us, it's quite important for our members. Yeah, and also we create inclusive space in the community, not only for the Hong Kongers and different people in the garden. We can share our experience, share our knowledge, share our skills. This is a quite safe for us and inclusive. Yeah, because for the Hong Konger, there's some background because of the past few year experience. It is quite difficult to trust people. Yeah, and we will think we may not be heard, be seen here. Yeah, it is very important to make a step and reach out to support this is also about our mental well-being. Yeah, it's really obvious impact for us. Yeah, thank you.
Deepti, any reflections from you?
So, I mean, the real world impact, as you said, we're in the very, very early days. In addition to what Pandora said, that the impact it had on a community. So, what I am at the moment with my academic hat on is trying to go to the local nurseries and the local breeders and asking them if they can grow these seed banks with the results that we have got, and telling them, this is where the community is. This is what I have done with them. Do you want to take these plants forward and start growing them on a larger scale? Because we know the consumers are sitting here, and they're largely invested in maybe eating the vegetables which are homegrown. But not everybody has the power to do that, right? So if you also grow them a little bit, give us space. What I ask for them is to give us space so that we can grow some of our own crops there, so that they can feel happy about it and also, fulfill their daily needs on that. So I'm still in the very early stages, but I'm talking around to the breeders and other people who work on similar things, if it can possibly integrate the two things together. So that's from my side.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think we've heard a really good array of impacts coming from the work that you've talked about, all the way from, you know, the individual people involved in the projects to that sort of broader societal policy and practice impact. The next question I had, and this is something that I know one of the sessions later on is going to pick up on, is the kind of issue of research quality. And one of the tensions in this kind of work can sometimes relate to what perceptions about what matters when it comes to research quality. And how can we ensure that community-driven research is taken into account as research of value when it comes to considering, you know, what we know about research in a particular area? Is this, I mean, I suspect some of you have had to grapple with this, and Hannah, I think you've particularly kind of referred to that in some of your answers about data. But I'd be really interested in your reflections on the work you've done when it comes to research quality and any sort of challenges that you've had to experience. But Hannah, do you want to kind of kick us off on that?
Yeah, I think something that we found that when we talk about community health impact assessments, people cease to think of it as a policy tool anymore because it has the word community on it. So this is something that we're really reflecting on, is that can what communities do just be called health impact assessments, just be called integrated impact assessments, and just be the content of the policy that they actually are. And like I said, when it exposes what is not being done by policymakers or not being done in these institutional capacities, like how can we bridge that gap? And then a lot of like the quality of the data itself is like really high because it's like considerate of all of the changing needs like in the community already. But we tend to work with principles that try to, in the process of trying to make this kind of work legible to others, is to also take into account that the community still own this research, that there's like there's an ownership that they have. This is their data, and there's like an element of privacy in how they want to present this as well. And sometimes that just needs some support. Sometimes they want to do it through illustrations, through drawings. So there's lots of different ways that this data can be presented, but ultimately that the ownership of this stays in their hands, and that there's like a longevity to it as well. So people aren't shaping their research in a certain way just so that it is legible to one audience and it doesn't ultimately serve them in the long run. So thinking about how to make things like as flexible as possible from a data perspective, and then how it's presented could be based on audience, and then for funding to be flexible enough to take that into account, that different audiences may require different presentations of that data.
Thank you, really helpful. Pandora and Deepti, any reflections from you on that topic?
So with regards to data, I would say that it's all the ownership of Pandora and her group. But I didn't find that barrier between them. Mind you, if I didn't get it, that I cannot use this for something else. I think it is strong enough to go and ask for something bigger and better, and also expand into more than a few oriental vegetables that we have done, and go into other things. So they're quite indicative, actually, the data. I wouldn't say that, and it's strong enough to provide evidence. So now it's a matter of either converting it into a bigger funding and asking for more money and doing it more rigorously, reproducibly, and then making that real world impact and going to the growers and say, well, this is what we have, and now are you ready to support us with money and or provide us some land so that Hong Kongers can grow their own vegetables there, or maybe go a different path and provide us a land and grow it for us, and we want to make it into recipe boxes or something like this. So I have opened all those channels, and I'm doing what I can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ben?
Yeah, just thinking about how integration into, I say, policy making can be a challenge with, say, citizen science data or community generated data. Those of us who were funded through the Citizen Science Collaboration Grant were invited to a roundtable with Professor C. and Diamond in 2023, I think it was, to understand and explore those barriers. And the note from that is published via the Cabinet Office, I think, online. And one of the barriers there is around trusting quality of data and the perceived quality of data they already work with. So if you work with data that you know has been generated through steps X, Y, and Z, and someone comes along with an A, B, and C, how does that fit into the framework and the decision-making process? And I think there needs to be kind of two-way learning there. There needs to be, policymakers need to be able to engage with communities to see how data are generated, see the robustness and the value of those data. And similarly, communities need to see the limitations that policymakers have as well, because they are often straitjacketed by regulation. So I think that was something that was really valuable that came out of this. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sorry, can I guess
Yes. Please.
can I say the data is also about our lived experience? Yeah, include our lived experience. So not apart from the growing the plant about the plants, and I also want to include the human experience throughout the project. And because of we have a lived experience, the data is not is qualitative, how to present as in a qualitative way, and support the people to maybe develop more about the how for in our project is about the formulations of identity. So how to use we are also thinking about how we use our lived experience on the identity building to make it more presentable to the public and let people to know how to build up on top of our original identity, build up on the new way. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Pandora. Right, I'm going to ask a sort of final question in this format, and then I'll draw this to a close. But the sort of the final reflection that I think would be really helpful from all of you is just what you would find most useful from a funding perspective in terms of seeing work like your own being supported. And don't just think about more funding. It's also about the kind of mechanisms and the particular approach that's been taken. But any reflections you have on the scheme that you were funded through and how that was helpful and what we might be able to do to improve on that in the future would be really useful. Ben, can I start with you?
Yeah, if I'm being completely honest, this funding pot was incredible because it enabled trust between the researchers and the funders. And often you'll find in research projects there's a real nervousness. If you put a foot wrong, someone's going to come and give you a clip around the ear, basically. So there's a nervousness. But within this funding opportunity, there was a space to voice challenges, voice concern. And I think that broke down a lot of anxieties and barriers to trying to develop as good a project as possible. You didn't feel like someone was breathing down your neck all the time, which is great. In terms of widening participatory research into other research landscapes, it's good to hear that other funding organisations, say NERC, for example, who wouldn't typically be considered someone who would fund these types of projects, consider participatory research within those research remits. I think one thing that we need to be careful of is that we might change the language of the call, but if the people on the funding panels who are making decisions aren't changing as well, then we might just be straitjacketing into same old, same old. So there's a bit of learning, I think, for all of us around who sits on the funding panels, who makes decisions to enable community-led and participatory research to really thrive throughout all of those funding networks.
Great, thank you. And Deepti and Pandora, any reflections from you?
Regarding the funding, at least I hope the funding should we have a community center approach. Maybe this angle, yeah, it's not only how scientific procedure is has an angle of building human, building people, building the communities. That means building the people, and of course, and can I say that the funding periods should be longer. Yeah, because we need to take time to build up people because the community is dynamic, pragmatic, and unpredictable sometimes. You know, we are all affected by the society. Yeah, so we is a dynamic process. So how the as a community net researcher and the participant can react with the funder. I think this is a process. It should involve the funder together and think about how to make use of the funding to really support the build up the society. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, coming up from what Pandora has just mentioned, I think now the second bit, the funding should be to think that have the change which has been set in, or the seeds which has been set in this pilot project, what impact it is taking now. Are the communities still wanting to do more, or they are kind of intimidated by the research that we did and they don't want to go forward? What are they thinking about the mental well-being? Do they want to continue, doing these kind of things to and build their strong mental health and keep engaging with each other? Or it also depends on what community wants to do. They want to increase their group further on from a group of 15 to maybe 50 and then start engaging, because the more people you bring in, the more ideas you have. So a pilot project can at least give us, I mean, it takes several blocks to say that this can happen. Now it's for the committee to decide what more they want to bring in there. So it's definitely, there's a reason behind asking for more money, is to expand this research into and integrate it with more people, and maybe also an opportunity for university and community to integrate well and bring about better and long-term impacts.
Great. Thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you. I think for us, it's to think about how, like, say, a project funding, like how do we turn one health impact assessment into a toolkit, is to think about this as like a knowledge infrastructure, and to think of and to organize our funding and our use of funding as organizations, even when we receive project funding, is to think about how do we do this infrastructurally. And that can only really happen when there's some like the funding is free of like an overbearing like accounting, because there is like this flexibility that we assumed we would be taking these groups on a journey, and then we realized we were on their journeys. And then so like all of these groups are that they're joining a health impact assessment because they're wanting to advance health justice. Halfway through the program, there's a local election and they're gearing towards that. Then how can we as this infrastructure like pivot towards like supporting them and like thinking of this like solidarity between organizations, and how do we pool like different organizations or projects that have received funding, how can we in some ways pool and collaborate on that, and then the growth from that like gets greater as well. But I think there's just some idea of like flexibility in this across time as well, because also we realized that a lot of the funding we were using were redistributing and remunerating the groups that we were working with, that were then using that funding to support and resource areas of their work. So a lot of this is like a redistribution of resource as well.
Great, thank you. So I think that needs to, I need to bring this session to a close. I mean, I hope like me, you found that an incredibly stimulating session. It's been really inspiring to hear about some of the work that you've been doing and the impact that has had. Both at a sort of broader level and on the sort of specific communities that you're working with. And I think particularly in this kind of last area of discussion, some of the points you've made about funding and the way we fund and the way we assess, I think are really helpful points for us to think about as UKRI, as we sort of carry on with our work in this area. So on that note, I'll draw this to a close, and can you join me in giving our panellists a huge thank you.